So this week we asked you about supporting the UK continuing to provide military assistance to Ukraine. 2/3 of you in favour of the continued provision of military aid.
On who is trusted to manage ongoing Brexit negotiations regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol, 12% said that Rishi Sunak was the man for the job, compared to 16% for Sir Keir Starmer. 36% said neither were cut out for it.
It's a bit of a blow, isn't it? More people in support of corporation tax rising from 19 to 25%. 2 in 5 saying they support that increase, which is I think a bit of a shocker in all of that, because in terms of the economy and growth, which everyone says they want, having a lower corporation tax encourages growth. I know people think big business, don't they? But actually, it's the little businesses that are going to be hit by that the most.
Yeah, absolutely. When asked who would be best to manage the British economy in the years ahead, 18% voted a Conservative government with Rishi Sunak, while a third said a Labour government with Sir Keir Starmer would be a better fit.
On who to vote for then in the next general election, Labour got 46%, the Tories 20%.
Finally, on whether to vote or not in the next general election, 55% said they were certain they would vote in the future election.
Interesting,
that is very interesting. Always is. GBNews People's Polls, always very interesting. And for more analysis on the latest poll, we are now joined by military historian and defence analyst Chris Newton. Good morning to you, Chris. Let's start with the British public's support for military aid to Ukraine. 2/3, 66% of the public strongly support the continued provision of military aid. Did that surprise you?
No, and it ultimately makes sense, because if we continue to provide Ukraine with military aid, then that helps prevent Putin succeeding in Ukraine. It also, and if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, then that would send a very strong message to not only to Putin but to other authoritarian leaders that aggression pays. And essentially, if we have a world order where invasions, annexations become the norm, then that will create further instability. And what happens in the world, given that we're an island nation, given that we're a net importer of energy, given that we're reliant on the sea for trade, 95% of our trade comes by sea, then what goes on in the world affects us, as we're seeing at the moment with prices and what's going on in Ukraine. So it's encouraging to see that the British public has a good grasp of what's going on, and our right to be concerned about the situation, and continues to support British military aid to Ukraine.
Interesting, though, isn't it, how our attitudes have therefore changed when it comes to all of this? I mean, everything that went on in Iraq and Afghanistan, we were told, this is ultimately for our own security. And yet, your support was very low for that action. I mean, obviously, that was boots on the ground. It was different, but nevertheless, because this is hitting us in our pockets, we seem to really woken up to the fact that we are affected by these world events directly.
Yes, I mean, that's true. And you've also got the situation where we have a conventional war in Europe. It's clearly visible, and clearly the amount of destruction that's taking place. Your report earlier on refugees, really brought home the human aspect, and the fact that this is going on our continent. And as I mentioned, or as I alluded to earlier, you have the prospect of, if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, then his ambitions doesn't end there. He talks in the past about restoring Russian historic lands, restoring old Russian empires, and therefore it's the British public really can see that this affects the continent of Europe, and therefore this is close to home.
What do you think will happen next in terms of aid? We know that Rishi Sunak is going to talk today about it being the West's priority to continue to send aid to Ukraine. We know about the tanks that are going across from Europe. But Boris Johnson wading into all of this, he's stepping up calls for Britain to supply fighter jets next. Do you think that's what we'll see next?
Yeah, I mean, Sunak has already announced training for Ukrainian pilots. In terms of fighter jets, I mean, although I'm supportive in principle of supplying fighter jets, there are technical issues with the Typhoon aircraft. It's a very complex, advanced aircraft. It will take months of training. There are some operational issues as well. The Typhoon prefers to take off on long, smooth runways. And that's not really in place in Ukraine at the moment. And also our Typhoon air capability is also conducting operations around the world as well. So there will be limitations in what we can supply in terms of the Typhoon, just as there were limitations in terms of our provision of Challenger 2 tanks as well. And that's not because of a lack of will, but that's purely because they're advanced technical weapons, and these take time to train on, and also you need the spare parts, you need the training capability as well, and therefore it's very, there are complexities in supplying these high tech kind of weapons platforms.
Chris, I was going to say, this is the problem, and you wonder, I mean, look, we as members of the public are not meant to know about all the details, but politicians should do, and you wonder if they do. I mean, it's like with the Challenger, I mean, obviously, it's only as good as the huge convoy which is required to support every tank. Typhoons are only as good as the ground support that is there to in effect, keep them up in the air. I mean, this is much, much more complex than just sending a plane and putting a pilot in it.
Yeah, you need, in terms of the aircraft, you need the ground support crew. You need training for that. You need the spare parts. You need the ammunition. Obviously, you need training as well. So you're right. This is extremely complex, and these are also advanced systems. And there are other aircraft out there in Europe, for example, the Gripen C, which might provide a better fit for Ukraine. It's more in terms of it's more simple to operate and so forth. But you're right. As much as I would like to send lots of aircraft and tanks to Ukraine, you do have to bear in mind those technical considerations as well.